Okay. Alrighty, so we'll get started. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today. My name's Orchid Mazurkovic, and I'm the director of the Hispanic American Periodicals Index. And the other person you can see on your screens is Michael Scott, my colleague here at HAPI, and sort of the volunteer. He's sort of the main volunteer coordinator, so he's the one that a lot of people connect with um, when they're doing their indexing. So the purpose of this session is basically to give us an opportunity to give a little bit of a quick introduction to HAPI, and then provide a little more detail about what's involved with being a HAPI contributor, being one of our volunteer contributors. So we'll be covering basically, a sort of a brief history of HAPI. Hopefully, many of you are already familiar with HAPI, but to give you a sense of what we do and what our history is, and how the volunteer program is involved in that. Michael will give a demonstration of the system, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and expectations for our volunteers. We ask that you just hang on to your questions until the end. As Michael mentioned, we are recording this, but we'll turn off the recording at the end so that people can ask questions outside of the recording. Okay. So first up, I'll tell you a little bit about HAPI. We are an index to scholarly journals about Latin America, the Caribbean, Latina populations in the United States, and the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora globally. We, as I said, mainly scholarly periodicals, but we do include a few things that are a little less scholarly, but for the most part, we're looking at journals. We include content journals from around the world. We index, I'd say the majority of our journals come from the region, but of course we index a lot of journals from the United States, Canada, Europe. We've got a couple from Japan, from South Korea, Australia, so really all over the world. We include content that's in a variety of languages. The majority of the content's in Spanish, followed by English and Portuguese, and then a small number of articles in Italian, German, French, Creole languages, indigenous languages, and a handful in Japanese and Korean at this point. So our database includes citations plus subject description of the content of the articles. And that subject description is done in using sort of a modified version of the Library of Congress subject headings. The way we apply them is a little bit different. The way we build them is a little bit different. And occasionally we'll add things that we think aren't represented in or well represented in LCSH. Or we'll modify the heading if we don't think that heading is, meets our needs or isn't ideal. We don't include full text ourselves. There's not full text in our database, but we do point to full text when it's available. And of course, for almost all of the journals that we have from Latin America, those are almost all open access. It's really hard to find any that aren't open access at this point. And then, of course, there's a lot of open access materials from other journals around the world, but some of it also, we do point to journals that are subscription-based as well. Staffing-wise, right now, it's just Michael and I working as editors here at HAPI. The editors are librarians. We're in the librarian series at UCLA. That's where we're based at University of California, Los Angeles. And we are librarians, and the HAPI librarians will also typically have an academic background in Latin American studies. We also, so we're in the Latin American Institute here at UCLA, and so we do have some additional administrative staff support from the institute staff. And then we also have interns and students working with us on various projects, from year to year. This year, we currently have Matt Palmer working with us. He was at Salam this past year. For those of you who attended Salam this year, you might have had a chance to meet him. And he is working on a couple of projects for us. One, an updating of Indigenous names in our database, and also working on our Cielo plus HAPI or HAPI plus Cielo project. So the students, that kind of changes from year to year, but Matt's been working with us for a year now and he's continuing this year. So in terms of HAPI history, really briefly, HAPI actually started at Arizona State University, ASU, in the early 1970s. And the person who started it, Barbara Volk, she was a librarian at ASU. And the OAS used to put out an index to Latin American periodicals. And it was one of the few sources that people could use to get at that material. But that ceased, I think, in around 1970. And so she wanted to create a tool that could provide access to the periodicals in the collection at ASU, and also perhaps be expanded out to be a resource for other libraries. And that's exactly what happened. Part of that happened because she went to Salam. She took this idea to Salam. And obviously the Salam membership, not surprisingly, were very supportive of this idea and helped her to realize that idea. And that was the start of actually the Salam connection and the volunteer connection for HAPI. At that time, because it was such a small staff, I think there maybe was 2 staff people at that time. HAPI relied on volunteer contributors, primarily drawn from Salam, who could help us create the records that would go into HAPI Online. And they would create those records and they would send them into the HAPI office on paper way back in the old days. And they would be edited and then added to the database. And that role for volunteers, for contributors, has continued to this day. We typically have between 20 and 30 volunteers who are working with us, helping us create the basic records for HAPI, and then really playing a very essential role in the work that we do. So we are coming up actually on our 50th anniversary. I think the first issue of HAPI, the first real volume of HAPI came out in, I think it was 1977, but it was actually for 1975 content. So we are coming up on 50 years of being around. And our name actually, I think, reflects that age, because Hispanic American Periodicals Index, it's a little unclear what Hispanic American really refers to, but that name sort of comes out from a period when that was a term that was used to some extent for Latin America. You think about like the Hispanic American Historical Review, well-known journal, also Hispanic American. And we've thought about changing the name of HAPI over the years to sort of better reflect what our content is. But it's tough because we've been around for a long time. And of course, we'd lose our really great acronym, HAPI, which is, a great acronym. So we started out as a print volume, and then we, like most indexes from that period, moved to an online version. And then in early 2000s, we became online only. And that move to online only allowed us to do some upgrades for HAPI. We now have a website that is searchable in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. All of our subject headings include translations from English to Spanish and Portuguese as well. Let's see, what else do I want to cover? Currently we have our own website, hapi.ucla.edu, based here at UCLA, for accessing HAPI, but we also are available through EBSCO, available on the EBSCOhost platform, and HAPI indexing is available for mutual subscribers of HAPI and the Prisma product that Clarivate puts out. We do, within UCLA, we are what's called a self-supporting unit, and so we have to generate income to cover our costs. So we are available for subscription. The money that we bring in for subscriptions covers all our expenses here at HAPI from our salaries to our computers to the internet hosting that is done to the paper clips that we buy. So we do have those subscriptions to cover our costs, but we have been freely available to institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean for many years now. So that's a quick background on HAPI. We will now sort of shift in a little bit more to what indexing for HAPI looks like. So hopefully most of you have had a chance to take a look at the HAPI website, and Michael, I think, will be showing that just a little bit when his section starts. But we have the website that most people will use, most people will be familiar with. But we also have another system that manages all the behind the scenes aspects of our work. And we refer to that as HAPI Central, or HC. So HAPI Central is a web-based tool that allows us to manage our workflow and also allows us to manage our subject headings, our name authority. We have all our subscriber information in there, our volunteer information in there. And of course, we have the tool that we use for actually creating the database records that then are seen in the HAPI online version, or the publicly facing database, or the database that you see in EBSCO. It's great because it sort of covers all the aspects of our work, but the version that our volunteers see is actually sort of just a piece of that. But that is the tool that volunteers use to do all their indexing now, and to see what their indexing assignment is, etc. So Michael also is going to give you a quick look at that. So I think with that, I'm just going to pass it over to you, Michael, so you can move on to the demonstration.
Sure. Here is, I will start with a screen share. And I always get confused between windows, but I think this will work. Screen, and then here, do you see a web page that is happy? So this is a sample record from our database that we picked out. And if your institution or subscribes to HAPI, you should be familiar with this. We're also on EBSCO, I think Orchid mentioned, so it'll look a lot different, but the content is essentially the same. Yeah. We have very basic search boxes and advanced search up here. Search terms, as you see, we have our languages here, all of that. Very, I think it's a really nice site, very clean and easy to use, pretty intuitive. You can change languages up here, Espanol and Portuguese. And so with this record, I just wanted to show how our HAPI Central, this is what we call HAPI Online, HO, as the actual public-facing side. And this is a record from the Chilean journal. And this record is about hotel workers. And the article that this record is about hotel workers, immigrant hotel workers in Chile. So we cover a wide variety of topics. And so on the side, if you decide to volunteer, this is what you'll be working in. Here you have the title. This is HAPI on HAPI Central, and I'll go over a bit on this stuff. You don't have quite all this stuff. A lot of this stuff will be gone from your account, but we have this for managing all of our stuff. But the difference on the HAPI Central side, you'll see here's the title. Here's the DOI, which links directly to it, the article, the authors, which I'll get to in a bit, these sort of keyword languages, what kinds of things are there in the, so we know we have as an abstract bibliography. The order isn't the same, but it works. keywords, we call them additional descriptors, and so on and so forth. And here are the subjects, which I'll also get to. Down here at the bottom of the record in HAPI Central, you see a note I wrote to Orchid when she edited and proofed my record. And obviously I was like, there's something about this. I said, well, here's just a note in case you're not seeing it's they're actually undocumented. And example, if you're indexing an article and you're not sure about an author, these are not public notes. They're just on the there are for us, a note to us as editors of your work. And down here is where we copy and paste abstracts. Not every journal has given us permission to include abstracts, or they don't have them. That's also pretty common. So that's a very basic overview of how the public side and um, uh, the kind of admin side, I guess I would say, work and administrative. And here on the left, you will, I think I don't really see volunteers view very much, but you'll have a queue here of journals. And I think everything else that you get is just links and resources, which is if you have some questions about authorities or sometimes these colonial Spanish terms, they're very complicated. Roman numerals can get complicated, and place names, all that. All kinds of authorities from Biblioteca Brazil, from Mexico. If you know other sources, you can let us know. Orchid IDs are getting very popular in Latin America, I would say, in the past year. They can be handy searches for verifying authors. So I'll go back to that record. I think I can just go back to it. There we go. So when I index this record, I had to, we have two kind of things that we do. And so in the training, we would do one session for the descriptive, which is overall pretty straightforward, except for authors, which they're slightly less straightforward. I don't think they're that bad. And then also there are subjects down here. So in the training, we would actually have two sessions, one for the descriptive, get through an issue, just make sure everything looks right. Second training, we started talking about these subject groups. So we used to have somewhat stringent rules about descriptive. We've really loosened up in recent years. This has been the trend in libraries. If you know, I started out as a cataloger with AACR2, which like capitalization rules and blah, blah, blah. And now in RDA and research description access, it's generally, not always, but generally it is just put what's there. And that's kind of been our mindset. If we have a title that's in all capital letters, we will follow Chicago for capitalization, things like that. But in general, the description is what's there. The page numbers and the DOI, copy and paste it, right click to copy it. And I'll get to authors in a second, go through the article, check things out. And that's it for descriptive. For authors, and I hope you can see this, let's say I forgot to add Orchid as an author to this great article. This is an example. So this pop-up, can you see the pop-up window? Great. This comes up and I'll just search Orchid and then this kind of selector comes up in the upper right. Don't worry about the details. We'll get to this in training, but basically, we always are assuring that we have the correct author, spelled the right way. You don't have to type it out every single time. And we just save it. And that's it. And it's a really great system. On the public side, if you click on an author, you can see other related. This person just has one article. But if they had a bunch of articles, maybe there others are, oh, just one. They're all brand new newbies. Oh, and it updated automatically. I didn't know it did that. That's wild. Make sure I delete that. And I didn't even save the record, and it did it. Um, uh, uh, but at any rate, that's the use of the records. And in each, I will go back into the author record. We do keep track of them. Here's an entire author record. Orchid writes on HAPI, for example. And you can see all of these, oops, let me go forward. Here's the affiliate unit. We also include their emails. And I also like to use this information for authority work, for verifying authors. You know, if they're a similar name, you can use an institution to kind of figure out where they are, things like that. But it's a service we have on the public side. Just if you want to know more about other things that the person has written. And that's kind of it for the descriptive part. And the initial training would cover those things. And then we would ask you to complete an issue we start with the journal selection. We figure out a couple of training dates, and then you just do the descriptive, and we can finish the subjects for that issue. But it's just to kind of get you used to doing it and getting used to HAPI Central. And then in the second training, we would get into subject groups. And if you've done any cataloging, this would be pretty familiar. A lot of our terminology, Orchid said in the beginning, we pretty much follow Library of Congress. I would say we're gradually moving away from it a little bit. I don't know. We can do our own thing. We don't contribute directly. We have created some subject headings, but through the LIPA funnel. But some of our terminology, the structure is actually based in our print version back when we had that. But at any rate, it kind of works very similarly to authors. And we have a limit of 4. If there's other topics that you kind of wanted to include, you can put them in as keywords. We tend to go for a 4 maximum, doesn't have to be 4 topics. And it's all here. And I'll just remove it just for sake of example. But when I added hotels, you just search. Our search is very simple. You don't have to do asterisks or anything fancy like that. And there it is. You notice here's a selector, just like with authors. And this is Chile, subdivide by country. Very simple. Chile. And that was it. Here, there are 3 different levels, psychological aspects. And I added that one. There it is in the selector. If it had other subject headings with service, like if I search industries, industry, that's even more. All kinds of industries. But I knew at the time this was service industry. So I just searched that. And and I added it, same thing. Chile down here, or Control F to find it. And then down here, we have topical subdivisions beyond that. And we would go over all this in the training session. Again, don't worry about actually remembering this. Where did it go? There we go. And that's really like the very short version of what you'll do. Some groups are, I find, my background is in literature. I find I'm better with economics. I don't think you have to think too much about some econ. But like it's pretty straightforward. And but I find anthropology can be very complex. Then you're talking about indigenous groups and different aspects of their culture. Our project naming the names of indigenous peoples, that is a project we're currently working on. And that can be, there's some complications with that, but we go over all those things. And I think we're planning on having kind of a refresher training. I don't know if Jesse made it or not, but down the road, if you need extra help with or review of any of these topics, feel free to let us know. And that's the very short version of it. And so the first training, just a quick review, the first training is the descriptive, where we just go over how HAPI Central works. And you do an issue in 2 weeks. we'll actually finish the indexing on that issue. And then the second one is on the subjects, which they're a little more, they are a bit involved. I would say that. But not, it is not impossible. So if you are into metadata, which I imagine you're librarians, you have some interest, and certainly want to work in. I mean, I find learn all kinds of things that from my work that I only find out through this job. So things that interest you in Latin America, you pick journals in your area of interest and all of that. So that's our basic setup and kind of the plan for the training that we have. And the next, oh, I do want to show the next step. And that I'll just show, this is in HAPI Central. When you are done, you submit the issue. And then I go in and here are some issues. Alteridad. This is was Carlos Cartagena. He's from.
Sorry, Michael, we can't see the screen.
Oh, I thought I always do that. There we go. How's that?
There you go. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So here is an issue that one volunteer, Carlos Cartagena, he lives in Quito, indexes for us. And I go in, or it's in my queue, so I'll do it. And basically we just check these records. And we want to be sure that before they go live, that they're of good quality, they're accurate, especially, if you work a reference desk, you get the wrong pagination, like this is why. This is the stuff we check for. And we assure kind of quality control and making sure that it reflects the record reflects the content of the article. And then from that point, we do one more check. And this is something only Orchid and I see. You don't have to worry about any of this, but just finalizing the process is the proofing. Very quick review, checking for typos, rechecking pagination, things like that. Very very straightforward check. And then the next day we submit this and it goes live and it's on HAPI Online. So I just I'll probably proof WAS next. So if you have a subscription to HAPI, you'd probably see it. I'll probably do it. I have another meeting, so I'll probably do it in the morning. And so it'll be live on Saturday, right? And that's what happens. So one thing, and I think Orca will also emphasize this, is that don't worry about perfection. That is okay. Worry about completion. That's the most helpful thing for us, that it's starting the process. And we check each other's work. Our work is not perfect when we do it. And that's the main point, is to have a couple of eyes on all of our records before they go live. And so it does help us a lot. If we had to do all of these records from scratch, we couldn't do it. Like, and so the volunteers are a very important part of getting this process going and being an important part of the whole editorial process. And Orchid will now talk about expectations.
Thanks, Michael. So that's a quick kind of behind the scenes look at what the work of the volunteers would look like in our system, or does look like in our system. For volunteers, when they start with us, we're pretty flexible, actually. We ask that officially, we ask that you select 6 titles to index over the course of the year. But in reality, we're quite flexible about that, because I think back in the olden days, we were very, very rigid about, you had to pick 6 and you had to do 6. But I think just the reality of people's work, that can be, I think, a little bit too much of a burden for folks. So we do ask that, you pick 1 or 2 at minimum. you can start out with like a couple. If you want to add more, if you find that's manageable, that's great too. Um, but we appreciate if for those folks who want to contribute to HAPI and want to be a part of the project, but maybe don't have the time to give that much, we can find ways for you to make meaningful contributions to the work. So we are quite flexible about that. So we have a set list of titles that we index. And what we do is we volunteers select from that list the titles that are of interest to them. And then those titles are assigned to the volunteer indexer. So as a new issue becomes available, that will go into their work queue in HAPI Central. And then the indexer does the indexing and submits that for review, and eventually that goes online. So when you pick your titles, we encourage you to pick things that are going to be interesting for you, of course, that are available to you. If you pick titles that are open access, that's great. Some titles are subscription only. So if your institution doesn't have a subscription to that particular title, it's not really going to work, right? So pick things that are available. We also suggest that if you're going to pick multiple titles, that you be a little strategic in your selections. So we do have a couple of journals or a few journals that are like 6 a year. We have some journals that are only once a year, but there's like 40 articles in that. So we encourage you to take a look and be a little strategic just to make sure you're not giving yourself too much of a workload. So, maybe you want a couple annuals in there, or, you want to make sure that, the journals that you're selecting aren't all huge, so that you have too much work for you to be able to get done. The other thing I would say is that once you've chosen and you started working on HAPI, it does take a while to become familiar with just the ins and outs of HAPI Central. I don't think it's actually that complicated, but it's new, it's different. So it takes a while to just get familiar with that. We have an instruction manual that was on that links and resources page that Michael showed you. So we have the instruction manual. Of course, there's lots of detail in there about how to do everything. And that's a lot to, kind of get a handle on. So one thing we really try to encourage is to be regular in your indexing. Even if you only have 1 or 2 titles, to try to work on those on a regular basis. I know some of our indexers will set aside a couple hours every Friday afternoon, if that's sort of like, kind of a less or a quieter time when they can get a bit of work done. Some people will do it monthly. But for those folks, there are some people who will just do it like once a year. They'll sit down and do their indexing. And I think that's creating a little more work for yourself, because you have to relearn HAPI Central. You have to relearn all the instructions that are in our instruction manual. Well, you don't have to relearn them all, but you have to have a sense of how it's done. And so if you have to kind of look up, how to do things, I think that's just a little bit, makes it a little more difficult. So I think trying to kind of do it regularly so that you can build up your knowledge and your comfort with the system and with our rules, I think it just makes it a little easier along the way, and helps you get the work done. I think that something that happens too is that when you have to kind of invest that effort into relearning, it deters some folks from getting to the work. You end up procrastinating a little bit about it with getting it done, because you're aware it's going to be a little tricky. So again, just trying to stay on top of it. I think it just is helpful for you. I would say, in all honesty, that we're not great about giving feedback. I know a lot of indexers will start and, you'll really want feedback on, well, how was my work? And at the beginning, we really do try to provide that feedback. But after you kind of get up and running, there's no denying that we're not great at giving feedback when we review your records. And that's usually because we're kind of more focused on just getting the work done. If there is some recurring issue, some mistake that you're making consistently, then we'll reach out and just give you a heads up. Hey, you're doing this, you should be doing this, just let you know. Or if there's some confusion that we're seeing consistently, we'll reach out about that. But we're not great about getting back to you. However, we are always happy to get your questions and respond to those. When it's less on us to sort of, just sort of do that when it's a question coming into us, no problem. We're very happy to help with any issue, large or small. But just something to be aware of. Um, I think when you're doing the work, I think really you just need to keep in mind that who's using this, who are the happy users, and you folks hopefully are happy users, and the students you work with and your scholars are happy users. And so you just bring that knowledge, I think, to creating the records. And I think that it's not that's not hard. I think also it is kind of helpful because I think one thing you tend to become, I think, a very good happy user because you really understand how happy records are structured and how to search for them, how to find things. And I think also a benefit can be just keeping up on what's going on in our field. Because when you're I remember when I was a frontline librarian, often you didn't have a lot of time to, um, really, when you're a student, of course, you're reading lots of journal articles and you're immersed in these issues. And when you start working, you don't have that opportunity to stay on top of the literature in the same kind of way. And I know some of our volunteers appreciate the opportunity of doing the indexing and seeing that as a chance to, see what's going on in their latest, their favorite journals. And I guess just the last thing I'd say about volunteers and expectations is just emphasizing what Michael said, and that's don't sweat it. I know some indexers are really concerned that they're going to make a mistake and they're going to submit it and it's going to end up in HAPI, in HAPI that the public facing HAPI, and just be don't worry about it because of course everything you do, both Michael and I will have a look at it, a more in-depth look in that editing process, and then a final look in that proofing process, and just to make sure that nothing important was missed, or there's not a typo and things like that. Of course, always things get through, but there are a number of steps in our quality control to make sure that the records are in pretty good shape when they go into HAPI. So you don't have to sweat it. You can just do the work, try to get it done, and hit the submit button, and don't worry about it from that perspective. Sometimes people will hang on to things because they want to make sure it's really perfect, and I think that can be frustrating for us because we want those issues coming in so that we can do the editing and the follow-up and get those records live in HAPI. That said, I will say that because we have such a volume of records that we're constantly indexing, editing, and proofing, there's often a time delay between when you finish your indexing and when we get a chance to edit it and make it live in the database. So just because you turn something in doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go live right away, because it might just end up somewhere else in our queue, our work queue, and it might take a while to get to. But anyways, that is, I think, being a volunteer in a nutshell, being a HAPI contributor in a nutshell. And I think Michael is now just going to tell you a little bit about some more volunteer options and next steps.
Right. Thanks. And yes, this is we're nearing the end. We do have options for volunteers. We've come up over the past few years, I would say. One thing that a few volunteers do is only that descriptive part, where all you do is just the title, authors, page numbers, everything, just the description of the article and no subjects. And this way, when we get to it from in the editing part, we have the work done for us and we can add the subjects later. This makes it go a little faster. You're still contributing something to HAPI. It is a big help. Journals do all kinds of things. So having that done, I mean, good things mostly, but there's a lot of variety in what they do. And so when that's done, that helps us get things out. And one volunteer also suggested, maybe, I think it was right after Salam, having the opposite. We've never tried this, where the volunteer would do the subjects, but not the descriptive. That to me seems like more work, but maybe if you're still interested in looking at these articles and doing that work, we would be, that would be experimental, but we would work with you to try out and see how that goes. But we do have maybe, I'd say half dozen, like 6 or so volunteers who only do descriptive. They don't, is that about right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And just to, if I can add for a moment,
Yeah.
The reason we did that, we created this option of doing only the descriptive, is that for some folks, they were, you could knock out the descriptive information, the article, title, author, et cetera, pretty quickly. But sometimes doing that subject analysis and picking out the subject headings, that would be like just a little bit, that's just a little more involved. It's a bit more work. And some people just find that a little frustrating, or yeah, frustrating, I guess. And so we said, okay, you still want to index, let's have you just do the bibliographic, and don't worry about the subject, the subject work, which I think can be a little trickier when you're not working with the subject thesaurus on a daily basis, right? Finding the right headings. So that's just why we created that option, and a number of our volunteers have taken us up on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael.
No, that's fine. And that, and there is also the option that most people do, which is both. And we still, so those are, and again, we can go over all of this in the training. Don't remember. It's okay if you don't remember this. This is just laying it out there. And I think we do suggest a couple hours a week probably to work on it. I think some volunteers have said like they need like a switch to kind of get into it and do it. And but if you work better, if you have a really quiet morning and you can just do an article a day or something, that's whatever works best for you. We do it all day, every day, but whatever works with your schedule, and that is you can plan it around that. And so the next steps, that if you are still interested, please drop one of us or both of us a line. Doesn't I think we can put the link in the chat or something for our contact. And or you have my email. I wrote you all. And if you're interested, we can start planning the 2 sessions I mentioned. The training I have done training in English and Spanish. I've done one in my very rocky Portuguese. That was I've done 2, I think, actually. But I can swing that. But I've done them. We have maybe a half dozen native Spanish speakers, I think, like it's in Latin America. And so that's fine. And the first session, as I mentioned, is descriptive. I think an hour for that. I don't think it takes that. It's pretty straightforward. And then the subjects, I'd like to leave probably an hour and a half. I think that can get, especially, it kind of depends on your journals. I think like, I find, well, maybe it's my personal thing, but anthropology can be complicated when you're dealing with particular subject groups. But that's something we figure out at that moment. And that's really it. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but we wanted to be thorough, I guess, in what we covered. And I will turn off the recording now. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I will stop it.